You are not losing your mind, but you are losing ground, and you have been doing so unknowingly since your late 20s. Most people assume cognitive decline is something that happens in old age, a future problem, something to worry about at 60, maybe 70. That assumption is why so many people arrive at 50 feeling mentally slower and have no idea when the slide began. The slide began at 30, and what you do in the decades between 30 and 50 determines the brain you have access to for the rest of your life. This video is not about supplements or biohacks. It is about 5 behaviors with direct neurological evidence, and the reason most people avoid every single one of them. Chapter 1. What actually happens to your brain after 30? Here is what nobody tells you. Cognitive decline does not begin with forgetting names or losing your keys. It begins silently at the cellular level, years before you notice any symptom. Starting in your late 20s, your brain begins producing less myelin, the insulating sheath that allows neurons to fire quickly and efficiently. Processing speed drops, working memory capacity starts to narrow. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning, focus, and impulse regulation, begins to thin. This is not disease, this is default biology. The question is not whether it happens, it is how fast. And the answer to that question is almost entirely behavioral. Neuroscientist Sandrine Thurrett at King's College London has shown that the adult brain retains the capacity for neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, well into later life, specifically in the hippocampus. But neurogenesis does not happen automatically. It requires specific inputs. Remove those inputs, and the brain does not hold steady. It contracts. The 5 habits below are those inputs. Miss them, and you are not being neutral. You are accelerating the default trajectory.
Chapter 2. The 5 habits. Habit 1. Aerobic exercise, at least 3 times per week. This is not a wellness suggestion. It is the single most evidence-backed intervention for brain health in the literature. Exercise elevates a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Neuroscientist John Rady at Harvard Medical School calls it miracle grow for the brain. BDNF promotes the survival of existing neurons, stimulates the growth of new ones, and supports the synaptic connections that underpin learning and memory. A 2011 study by Kirk Erickson and colleagues found that aerobic exercise increased hippocampal volume by 2% in older adults, directly reversing age-related shrinkage. You do not need elite fitness. You need elevated heart rate, sustained, 3 to 4 times per week. Running, cycling, swimming, brisk walking. The brain does not care what you choose. It cares that you do it. Habit 2. Sleep. 7 to 9 hours, protected. Sleep is not rest, it is maintenance. During slow-wave sleep, your brain activates the glymphatic system, a waste clearance network that flushes out metabolic byproducts, including amyloid beta, the protein that accumulates in Alzheimer's disease. Matthew Walker, neuroscientist at UC Berkeley, describes chronic sleep deprivation as one of the single most significant and modifiable risk factors for cognitive decline. One bad night reduces prefrontal function measurably. A pattern of poor sleep across years restructures the brain. You cannot recover lost sleep across a weekend. The damage compounds. Protect your sleep the same way you protect any other system you do not want to fail. Habit 3. Deliberate learning, acquiring genuinely new skills. Passive consumption does not build cognitive reserve. Scrolling, watching, listening, none of it creates the kind of neural demand that drives structural change.
What does learning something you are not yet good at? A new language, a musical instrument, a complex physical skill. When you engage a domain that is unfamiliar, your brain recruits wider neural networks, forms new synaptic connections, and builds what researchers call cognitive reserve, a buffer of neurocomplexity that delays the functional expression of decline even when biological changes are present. Yaakov Stern at Columbia University has spent decades studying cognitive reserve. His findings are consistent.
people with higher reserve show symptoms of decline significantly later, even when post-mortem brain scans reveal comparable levels of physical damage. The brain you build now is the reserve you draw on later. Habit 4. Social engagement. Real, effortful connection. Loneliness is not just uncomfortable, it is neurotoxic. John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago demonstrated that chronic social isolation elevates cortisol, increases neuroinflammation, and accelerates hippocampal atrophy. Socially engaged individuals consistently show slower rates of cognitive decline across longitudinal studies. The mechanism is not fully understood, but the signal is unambiguous. The brain requires social input to regulate stress hormones that would otherwise damage it over time. Passive proximity does not count. Meaningful, cognitively demanding social interaction, conversation, collaboration, disagreement is what generates the signal. Habit 5. Stress regulation, not stress elimination. Chronic stress is one of the most direct pathways to accelerated brain aging. Prolonged elevation of cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, damages the hippocampus directly. It inhibits neurogenesis, shrinks dendritic branching, and impairs memory consolidation. Robert Sapolsky at Stanford has spent 40 decades documenting what sustained cortisol exposure does to neural architecture. The findings are not ambiguous. Chronic stress does not just feel bad, it physically remodels the brain in the wrong direction. The goal is not the elimination of stress. Acute stress is neurologically neutral or even beneficial. The goal is regulation, practices that return your nervous system to baseline. Breathwork, meditation, time in nature, physical exercise. The specific method matters less than the consistency of return. Chapter 3. Why people avoid every one of these habits. None of these habits are secret. Every person reading this has heard most of them before, and most people are still not doing them. This is not laziness, it is neuroscience. Each of these habits requires delayed gratification. The brain does not feel the benefit of exercise today, it feels the discomfort of effort. It does not feel the benefit of protected sleep tonight, it feels the pull of one more hour of stimulation. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for long-term planning and impulse regulation, is in direct competition with the limbic system, which prioritizes immediate reward. And here is the cost most people never calculate. Every year you delay these habits is a year of default decline. The brain does not pause and wait. The forgetting curve applies to neural health just as it does to memory. Inaction is not neutral, it is a choice with a biological price tag. Chapter 4. How to actually build these habits. Do not attempt all 5 at once. That is how habits fail. Stack one onto something you already do. Exercise after your morning coffee, a deliberate learning block before you open your phone, a hard boundary on your sleep window 3 nights per week before expanding it to 7. The research on habit formation, particularly work by Wendy Wood at the University of Southern California, shows that context and consistency matter more than motivation. Motivation fluctuates, environment does not. Design the conditions and the behavior follows. Start with sleep and exercise. They are the foundation. Everything else, cognitive reserve, stress regulation, social capacity, is built on a brain that is rested and physically maintained. Get those 2 right first. Add the others over 90 days. Here's your challenge. Pick one habit from this list, just one. Tonight, before you sleep, write down the specific time and context in which you will do it tomorrow, not the intention, the when and the where. Research by Peter Gollwitzer at NYU shows that implementation intentions, if-then plans with a specific time and place, more than double follow-through rates compared to intention alone. One habit, one plan, written down tonight. Cognitive decline after 30 is not inevitable, but it is the default. The biology moves in one direction unless you give it a reason to move differently. 5 habits, all of them evidence-backed, all of them available to you right now. The only question is whether you treat your brain as something that needs maintenance before it fails or something you deal with after it does.
If this is the kind of science you want more of, subscribe. Every video on this channel is built the same way. No filler, just the research and what to do with it.